Force feedback is a very hot topic in sim racing, and also Assetto Corsa Competizione's own force feedback is also very controversial. Today's video is not going to be about any of those things. It will be about the settings that I use and I like for Assetto Corsa Competizione's force feedback using the Fanatec CSL Elite with this Formula 1 wheel. It will be more or less the same thing if you use another wheel for the Fanatec CSL. The way I set up my steering wheel is trying not to overly saturate it with force and effects. I try to have some sort of connection to a real car that I drive. So I drive an Alfa Romeo Giulietta, if somebody cares. I never driven a GT3 car, so my objective is to have something that resembles a car that I know into a steering wheel within, of course, the flexibility I have with this steering wheel, with this Fanatec. It doesn't mean the way I do it is the correct way. It might be totally wrong, but I like it, and you are of course welcome to try the settings that I use. One great thing about the Fanatec ecosystem is that you can have multiple profiles for multiple games. I have the profile just for Assetto Corsa Competizione that I found works particularly well with it. It doesn't mean that works well with Assetto Corsa. In reality, it's really bad on Assetto Corsa, but this one customized for Assetto Corsa Competizione works rather well. Going from the beginning, the sensitivity is the amount of rotation that you have in the wheel, and I have left it at automatic and put it in the game at 540 degrees. You don't really need much more than that in this game. Next up is the force feedback, and this one is going to be a little bit controversial. I leave it at 75, 100 is the maximum, 0 is the minimum, and I'll leave it at 75 for pretty much the same reason. I'm not sure if it's totally correct or if it matters or not. For the same reason that I used to do the same thing in the T300 RS. These are belt-driven wheels, so there is a lot of wear and tear on the inside. And one way, at least in my opinion, to increase the longevity of these wheels is to lower the maximum output by just a bit, in this case 25%. Even that the smoothness of the Fanatec CSL is actually really nice. It is a very smooth belt wheel. When you go over a certain threshold, it just feels a little bit sloppy, so lowering it to 75% also helps out reduce the sloppiness of the wheel far more than leaving at 100 and dropping it more in the software, at least that I find. So I leave it at 75%. It gives me a good balance between power, responsiveness of the wheel, and also smoothness of the action. Next one is ABS, which I'm gonna skip because I don't have the steering wheel connected to the pedals. So we're going to go to drift modes. Drift mode is basically a way to emulate power steering, or actually to give it a little bit of steroids to power steering. For Assetto Corsa Competizione, negative values, in this case I'm using -2. I really recommend negative values because you really want some sort of inertia or dampening on the wheel. Not too much to be impossible to move, but also not to the point where you don't have this type of dampening and the wheel becomes too fast and you don't feel any sort of resistance. If you go to -5, I found that the movement has too much inertia and it kind of feels that the movement is retarding too much your movement of the hands. So if you go to -2, at least I find in my case, it gives you that perfect sweet spot between a power steering mode without having too much inertia by emulating a driving shaft. The next one is a force, and in reality this is works in conjunction with the next two, which are called spring and damper, and these are called the force multipliers. And what force does is basically the amount of force that is coming from the base into you. In my case, since I don't like a very shattery effect where the force feedback is giving you too much information, I leave it at around 70%. That gives me enough. I know a lot of people are saying you should always use it at 100 and lower it in the software. It is a totally valid criticism, but in my case I found that it works really well for me at 70. It gives me just the amount of force that I want to have in my wheel. The next one are spring and dampers, and these are not really used in Assetto Corsa Competizione, at least that I've checked out. I've tried to figure it out, and I also seen it in the Fanatec forums. These next two are completely useless. I leave it at around 60 to 70% because this specific profile that I'm using is also used for GT Sport, and in reality it's a profile that works rather well. The next one is called Force Effect Intensity, and you should look at it as somewhat of a smoothness factor towards your effects. It goes all the way from off, where it's supposedly very smooth, to 100, where it's very direct, fast, and sharp in terms of loading up the effect and unloading the effect. What can end up happening is that if you go to something to like 100%, it can really feel like you're stepping over Legos on your steering wheel. So what I do is to lower it between 60 to 70%, which gives me at least, I think, the most accurate feeling. If you go too off, it just feels too smooth and it doesn't feel that the effects are really there. So at 70%, it gives you a very smooth delivery of the effect, but of course this one is also totally personal. Lastly, the Assetto Corsa Competizione software, go to the controls, and these are the settings that I have. On gain, I'm leaving at around 38% or 40% or somewhere around those lines. It's also usually personal. Like I said, I want to feel something that resembles closely to a power steering, and in reality these settings and with this gain, it just gives me that feeling. It gives me a little bit of resistance, not too much, but not too much free movement that it feels like it's a drift wheel or something like that. So at around 35 to 50%, it's perfect and it's usable for me, and I like it no matter if it's 35 to 50%, and at this moment I'm living at 38. For minimum force, I don't really like minimum force. I like that the dampening effect from the wheel is more enough to give you a minimum force that comes from the hardware, so I just leave it at 0. Dynamic dampening, I'm leaving at 0 because I don't find anything particularly good at 100 or 50 or 33 or 10. So I just leave it at 0. It just gives you a little bit of effect, a different effect on the dynamic, on the dampening, and I just feel that it's good for me to have it at 0, and it's the one I like the most. For the road effects, I'm leaving at 35, 40%. If you go to 100, it just gives you a too strong of a signal to the wheel, and like I said, I don't want to feel too much stuff going on the wheel. So 36% for me, it's more than enough, and it works really well, and it gives me the overall balanced package that I have with the settings that I have in the wheel. So essentially, these are the settings that I use on the wheel and on Assetto Corsa Competizione to help out, giving me a steering wheel feel that is not too chattery, and it's easy enough to drive and gives you just enough information to feel the understeer, oversteer, and going over bumps. If you use these settings after the fact that I created a video and uploaded it, leave me in the comments below what you think about it, or the settings that you use for Assetto Corsa Competizione on a Fanatec CSL Elite, so people can try more settings combinations. Don't forget to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing as well and hitting the notification bell so you'll see of new videos and streams as they come out. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.